Was there a mystery behind what just happened in Israel? Behind Gaza, Hamas? Was it foretold? Was it part of something ancient? Does it have to do with the end times? Is Hamas in the Bible? Is there an ancient mystery that revealed it, could have told us it would happen and the time it would happen?
That was Jonathan Cahn, and the night before the Hamas attack on October 7th, in his Friday Shabbat service, he was speaking at his Beth Israel, the congregation that he leads in Wayne, New Jersey. And he talks prophetically about the attack before it happened. Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Strang, and today on the Strang Report, we're going to find out more about what Jonathan Cahn believes is the prophetic significance of the Hamas attack, and it will surprise you. In the news, we see from a political point of view, a historical point of view, but few are giving you the prophetic point of view like Jonathan Cahn can. What you saw was a video that he posted recently that has had over 1.4 million views. I had wanted to interview him on my podcast right after the attack happened. I'm his publisher, and I've interviewed him many times on my podcast. I'm also a huge supporter of Israel, and I have the highest respect for Jonathan Cahn. However, his schedule wouldn't permit it, and in the meantime, he released this amazing video that went viral. He gave me permission to use his video, and it has had more views than any podcast I've ever done. I did it with his permission. We had permission to run it. However, someone reported that we had violated copyright because our permission was verbal and we were flagged, and so we took it down. Earlier, I had intended to comment like I am now, but at the time we did not have the software to do it, and his video was so powerful, I thought it speaks for itself. But I think I do have insights about what Jonathan has to say, and also toward the end of the podcast, I tell a mystery, a miracle about Jonathan Cahn that has nothing to do with his video, but it has everything to do with Jonathan, and you don't want to miss what I have to say. So here's my take on what Jonathan says is needed to this terrible war. 3, 2, 1. And here's my take on what Jonathan has commented on this amazing video about this terrible war.
We are not to be against any people. The ministry here, Hope of the World, has compassion projects for the people of Israel and also for the needy of the Arab peoples. But we also have to stand against what is evil. On the morning of the first Sabbath of October, while Israelis ready to celebrate the finale of their autumn holy days, Simchat Torah, which means the joy of God's law, it was set to be one of the most joyous celebrations of the Hebrew year. Terror struck the land and the people of Israel, a terror unlike any other that had struck Israel in half a century, and by another reckoning, unlike any that had ever happened to the nation. What would be the worst massacre of Jewish people since Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust? The enemy entered the land by sea, by air, from the Gaza Strip. Thousands of rockets fired into the dwellings of the Israelis, bringing destruction as Islamic gunmen broke through into Israeli territory, coming in by vans, foot, motorcycle, by boat, by paragliders, and carrying machine guns. They entered into Israeli towns, streets, farms, kibbutzes, villages. They found young families in their beds and murdered them, fathers and mothers, children, old men and women, the most young and innocent. Those they didn't murder, they took away with them bound as hostages. They terrorized them, brutalized them, raped them. Among them were those who had survived the Holocaust. Young men and women at a party held in the name of peace were abducted, brutalized, murdered. Peace activists were murdered. The lifeless body of a mother of an infant was spat upon and paraded around the city to cheers and joy.
Let that sink in. October 7th is said to have seen more Israelis killed than any other day since the Holocaust. This bloodshed and the fact that some people in the Gaza Strip were celebrating is something that is barely reported, so I'm focusing on it today in the Strang Report. Jonathan Cahn talks about Simchat Torah. It's a day of celebration. About 15 years ago, I happened to be in Jerusalem on this day. And down at the Western Wall, there had to be at least 10,000 people. I've never seen so many people there. And it was festive, and people dancing and carrying the Torah above their heads. Of course, every Shabbat is a joyous time. But this Simchat Torah was particularly joyous. And this was the day that the terrorists chose to attack Israel.
Hearing the news of what happened, Islamic crowds in the Gaza Strip erupted in celebration and joy, singing for joy, dancing for joy. So Islamic crowds celebrated and shouted for joy in the West Bank, in Europe, in New York. They celebrated in Harvard University and colleges throughout the West. On the day of Simchat Torah, the joy of God's law, when Israel was to rejoice, Israel's enemies were the ones rejoicing, and rejoicing in bloodshed, terrorism, savagery, and murder. Let's go behind it. Those rejoicing in the bloodshed did so in the name of Palestine. They say the land of Israel is Palestine. The Jews occupy it and need to be driven out of the land or murdered out of the land.
Let's consider the word Palestine. It comes from the Roman Empire, who destroyed the ancient nation of Israel, or some call it Judea, not long after the time of Christ. And it exiled its Jewish people all over the world. And so Rome had to pick a new name, and they picked a name of one of Israel's ancient enemies, the Philistines. If you know the Bible, you know that Goliath was a Philistine. If you know the prophet Samson's story, it took place in Philistine. Israel had other enemies back then, but the Romans chose to use the name of their worst enemy, Palestine. It comes from Philistine.
To invade the homes of families asleep, to murder children in front of their parents, to kill their babies in their cribs, to behead them. What is that? That is demonic. It's the fruit of an evil, demonic mindset and a spirit that celebrates bloodshed and destruction of the innocent. This is the demonic seed that's been germinating in Islamic radicalism, into which children, as in Gaza, are indoctrinated from their youth and told that it's a glorious thing to kill a Jewish person. They point to a verse in the Quran about killing Jews and believe it's a divine thing. It wasn't just that the people of Gaza celebrated. Students at our elite Ivy League colleges in the West, such as Harvard, they also celebrated. Chapters of BLM, Black Lives Matter, cheered on the killing and the bloodshed, the decapitation of children. One chapter actually had a picture in which they glorified a terrorist paragliding into Israel to murder innocent men, women, and children with machine guns. But they said that they were for the destruction of Israel from the beginning. And that same organization also said it was for the destruction of the family. Hollywood celebrities that threw in their enthusiastic support for BLM could not even throw a crumb of support to the fathers and mothers and children who were slaughtered in their home. Jew hatred, like evil, is a sickness. It transcends politics, the left or the right. There were extreme right-wing groups as well that also blamed Israel, but overwhelmingly it came from the left. And the fact is that anti-Semitism has now become a contagion, a sickness, increasingly afflicted the mainstream left. And just as our mainstream left-wing news channels featured commentators who blamed the Israelis for the massacre of Israelis, most of academia grew strangely silent. Harvard University overwhelmingly saw support for the murder of the innocent. Most of corporate America grew strangely silent. Most of the woke of wokedom, who would fly into a rage of condemnation at the slightest trace of what they would call microaggression, fell strangely asleep from their state of wokeness. They couldn't think of a single word to condemn the murder of children. Those of you who have put your faith in the left, let this be a revelation to you and a wake-up call, or a woke-up call. And if those of the elite universities become the leaders of the America of the future or the West of the future, then fear what America or the West will become. And if these can shed the blood of the innocent in Israel, then they can shed the blood of the innocent in America or the West. A Democratic congresswoman who condemns everything Israel does along with her squad was asked if she could condemn the decapitation of babies. She would not. She could not find it in herself to say that it might be wrong to cut off the head of an innocent baby. And you wondered how the Nazis perpetrated their atrocities and no one said anything or did anything. Well, you don't have to wonder anymore. And the Bible says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Woe.
To me, this evil perpetrated by Hamas is absolutely unspeakable. President Trump seemed to understand this. He ended giving aid to Hamas. Hamas has a charter that says it exists specifically to kill the Jewish people and to wipe Israel off the map. Their expression is from the river to the sea, and the river is the Jordan River, and the sea is the Mediterranean Sea. Yet Biden and his administration has given Hamas millions of dollars. They say it's for humanitarian aid, but you know that the money ends up in the hands of the military. And the Democrats have given aid to Iran, which funds Hamas. It's a terrible mess, but it's not just political or military, it's spiritual, as Jonathan Cahn tells us.
But the word has a different meaning in Arabic. In Arabic, the same word means zeal, fervor, fire, and fanaticism. That's exactly what happened on 9/11. That's exactly what happened in Israel. Evil and destruction and fanaticism. And so it was also marked by Hamas for that Sabbath day in Israel. But what exactly is that word that occurs in Psalm 55? The actual ancient Hebrew word, listen, is the word Hamas. The word Hamas is in the Bible. In Arabic, fire and fanaticism. In Hebrew, violence, evil, and destruction, appointed for 9/11. And it's what was behind what happened in Israel on that Sabbath weekend.
Isn't it interesting, the insights that Rabbi Cahn gives? I mean, where else are you going to hear about this? And I don't know the derivation of the words and if Hamas maybe picked it on purpose. But we need to understand what it means. And I think that what he says is significant.
Now, beyond the question of whether this could be prophesying a current situation, the amazing thing is what it speaks of is, in effect, is now in place. Then there's the prophecy of Ezekiel 38 and 39 of a coming war to take place in the last days of the nations gathered against the resurrected, reborn nation of Israel. And though there's debate about some of the nations mentioned, it clearly mentions the land of Turkey. And Turkey just happens to be an enemy of Israel right now. Another nation it clearly mentions is Iran. And so it happens that Iran is also Israel's deadly archenemy that cheered on the massacres, is threatening to bring destruction now to the nation of Israel.
You know, I think it's important to understand all of these geopolitical things about Turkey and Iran in the light of biblical prophecy. And I just urge you to share this video with other people, or go on YouTube and find the original video in its entirety. It's important to get this word out. We have to go around the news media, which barely covers this, and if they do, it's just in passing, and a lot of times in a critical way. But you know what? We can get around it. There are more of us than there are of them. There's great support for Israel in the United States, yet the left, in the media and in government and so forth, play up the support of Hamas and of Palestine. And so we have to do our part to get the word out.
Now, the angel came to tell Daniel about what would happen to the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, in the last days. But this principality, which is demonic, came against the purposes of God for the nation of Israel. But spirits don't die. And this spirit is identified as the spirit of Persia. Persia still exists. It is called Iran. So in modern terms, it is the spirit of Iran. It's identified as a spirit that seeks to stop the purposes of God for Israel. Well, it's amazing, because it's this very nation that has now become Israel's dangerous archenemy and chants death to Israel, seeks nuclear power, and seeks Israel's destruction. And whatever role it had in this invasion, this massacre of Israel, Iran has been the chief sponsor of Hamas in Gaza, the chief funder of the organization that has assembled thousands of missiles and terrorists to destroy the nation of Israel. That Hamas was even in a position to do what it just did is linked to Iran.
It's significant what he says about demonic activity. This is something you absolutely don't hear about in the secular arena, yet everything behind this is demonic. what he says about the prince of Persia, or now we call it Iran. We need to understand this, and there are spiritual things going on that are way, way beyond what meet the eye.
I was leading the Friday night worship service here at Beth Israel in New Jersey. And that whole night, I was led to open up and focus on one of the mysteries in the book I had just released in September, 30 days before the attack. This is what it looks like. It's called the Josiah Manifesto. It speaks both of ancient mysteries and their replaying in modern times. So the subtitle, The Ancient Mystery and Guide for the End Times. And what I was led to open up that night before everything happened was the mystery of the 50th year. And the mystery of the 50th year, as in the Jubilean year, is linked to return. And what happens in the 50th year, or the 50th anniversary, parallels what happened in the 50th year before it. It parallels what happened 50 years before it. It repeats it, or answers it, or fulfills it, or corresponds to it.
You know, there's so much more that Jonathan Cahn says in his books. In fact, in the Josiah Manifesto, which he just referred to, you can do a deep dive. This is a very interesting book. Jonathan Cahn's videos are interesting, but his books go to new depths, and I just encourage you to get it. And also his Return of the Gods book, which is still selling very, very well. He talks about these ancient gods that are coming back in modern times, and I think that we need to understand what's going on. You know, the Bible talks about the sons of Issachar who understood the times, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. This is why Jonathan Cahn writes his books, and why he does the videos that he does, is we want people, believers, to understand the time so we know how to respond and so we can influence public opinion. You know, public opinion is the basis of what we all kind of believe to be true. And if we don't speak up, people only hear the other side. So as I've said before, share this video. We've got to get the word out. And here's more of what Jonathan Cahn has to say.
So on the first Sabbath of October 2023, the forces of darkness used the same ancient pattern of redemption, the 50-year mystery used by God to restore Israel, to bring about destruction. What does this all reveal? The Bible says that in the last days, the Jewish people will return to Israel and become a nation again. So it's all happened. It says that Israel will be the center of controversy, and so Israel is once again in the center of the news and controversy.
You know, the miracle of Israel fulfills the prophecy that Jonathan referred to. Can a nation be born in a day? In our calendar, May 15th, 1948. You know, it's an example of how the Bible is true in modern times. As the ancient scriptures are true, and Israel is in the embodiment of this. Israel is God's chosen people. They're the ones who gave the Messiah to the world, the ones who started Christianity. It all goes back to the Jewish people and to Israel. And I think as believers, and I realize that most of the people watching this are believers, or you wouldn't be watching, we have to understand the very, very important part that Judaism has in our Christianity. And this is one of the reasons we support Israel. Now, it's not support Israel at any cost. Israel is a secular state, nation, just like any other. But we do it because God's hand is on Israel and because Israel has a place in end-time prophecy, and there's no one better than Jonathan Cahn to help us understand this.
There is a war against the existence of the Jewish people. It isn't natural. It transcends time and space. You can find the hatred of the Jewish people and Israel in Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America, America, everywhere. Even when there are no Jewish people, you find the hatred of the Jewish people. You find it in the modern world, you find it in the ancient world, you find it in the Middle Ages, and everybody gives a different reason, because it's not about the reason. It's not natural, it's supernatural, it's spiritual, it's demonic, it's satanic. The Bible says that God is real, and that the enemy of God, known in Hebrew as Satan or Satan, is also real.
You know, if you don't get anything else out of my podcast today, it's what he just said about it being spiritual and demonic. We have to understand that the hatred of Israel goes way, way beyond political. You know, here's this small nation Someone said it's the size of New Jersey. Yet look at how much focus, not just now, but over time, has been on this small nation. And that's because it's part of God's plan for mankind. And we need to understand this.
What happened in Israel is part also of a 2,000-year-old prophecy of the Messiah. The Jewish people have been waiting for the Messiah for 2,000 years, but what if the Jewish Messiah already came and most of them missed it? Then they would become like sheep without their shepherd. And when the wolves came to the flock, they would be helpless. When Messiah, Yeshua, known as Jesus, gazed out at Jerusalem, he wept. And he said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem." He said, "Your peace is hidden," or in Hebrew, your shalom is hidden from you, the things that make for your peace, but now it's hidden from you. He said that 2,000 years ago. And for 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been seeking for peace. And no matter what they do, they can't find it. And when it looks like they're about to have peace, as it did with the peace talks, then something happens to take it away. Because this one, Yeshua, just happens to be their Messiah. He's their Prince of Peace. And without him, there is no peace. Only when they turn to him, who is the hope of Israel, will they find their shalom, their peace. And that's not just true for the Jewish people. It's true for all of us. Only in him, only in his will, can you find your peace.
You know, if you are not a believer in Jesus or Yeshua,